Fisherman feels something hard slam into him, realizes it's a huge predator. But before we start, please make sure to subscribe to M&R TV and hit the bell so you never miss any upload from us. Also, leave a like right now. The shark was gliding through the warm Atlantic water just off the coast of Florida. He was hungry, but for him, that wasn't a problem. The murky waters was full of cobia, a big, fat fish sometimes called a black kingfish or black salmon. He'd get his fill. But then the 10-foot shark saw the meal of a lifetime. Floating through the water like a dead duck was what the shark believed to be the biggest cobia in the ocean, 70-year-old Rich Nuemann. Best of all, the grandfather wasn't looking. For the hungry shark, this was the easiest meal he'd ever had. It was Good Friday 2015. Rick Nuemann was celebrating the weekend with his good friend Julian Cruz, 3 miles off the coast of Florida. They were on a 20-foot vessel, talking politics, grandkids, and fishing. But for Rick, fishing wasn't a sport where you kicked your feet up and relaxed with a cold beer. He was a spearfisher. Spearfishing is like hunting in the fish's element, Rick always told his skeptical friends. It's a charge. That thrill of the hunt saw Rick below and Julian sliding into skin-tight wetsuits and trading in fishing rods and lines for an old-fashioned spear. In over 5 decades of shooting fish, he never ran into any problems in the water. This day started out as well as any. Right away, Rick shot a 51-pound cobia. He was happy with the catch, but as the morning bled into the afternoon, he grew restless. The visibility in this part of the ocean wasn't great. They needed to move. Julian captained the ship to an ocean reef and jumped into the water spear in hand. Following spearfish protocol, Rick waited aboard the ship. Having 2 divers down below would spook any cobia. Finally, his friend returned with good news. "There are cobia down there," Julian reported as he slipped back onto the ship empty-handed. This was welcome news for Rick, who was antsy to get back into the water himself. There was, however, a vital piece of information missing from Julian's report. The hungry shark knew this was a good spot for cobia, and the hungry shark was on his way to that spot for lunch. Of course, Julian couldn't have known that, which was why Rick jumped fearlessly into the water, with no idea how his life was about to change. Spear in hand, Rick dove down 40 or so feet, his eye on a cobia. He neared his target, felt his fingers tighten on his weapon, and was smacked hard in the side of the head. The collision beneath the sea was hard, like a car accident. In a moment of complete disorientation, Rick saw his scuba mask go flying and a 500-pound shark swimming away. He calmed himself. The shark was gone. He was alive. Then he touched his neck. He felt warmth, his blood pouring from his neck, his adrenaline truly pumping. He swam back to the surface, hoping to scurry back onto the ship. He didn't know just how bad the damage was until he saw Julian's face. What Julian saw was ghastly. Rick's ear was attached by a thin thread of skin. The cheek the shark had crashed into sported a deep, gushing wound, which gurgled blood onto the deck of the ship and into his wetsuit. Without help, he was going to die. So Julian called 911. He ran to the ship's controls and steered towards the shore as his ghost white friend, a grandfather, clutched weakly to the ship's console. Every time the ship hit a wave, Rick spilled more blood onto the deck. His time was limited. The 20-foot ship fought hard against the waves. To keep his friend alert and focused, Julian asked Rick how he was doing. "Okay," Rick said, underselling a bit, "but let's get back as quickly as possible." After 45 minutes, the ship finally reached the Florida shores, where paramedics were waiting. The rescue workers placed Rick on a gurney, hooked him up to some IVs, cut off his wetsuit, and shoved him into a helicopter. He was on his way to St. Mary's Hospital Trauma Center. Rick was woozy when the chopper landed. The flashing lights and frantic scrambling of nurses in the trauma ward were a haze to his fading mind. He held on for a while, but then the world went black. He woke up later with 200 stitches in his neck. They reattached my ear and closed up my cheek. The gashes down my neck and some more on my shoulder and back, Rick said of the trauma doctors. With a clear head, he looked back at the moment. "The doc said I was lucky," Rick recalled. "There are all kinds of arteries and glands in that part of the body that somehow didn't get hit. But the expert diver believed 2 things were responsible for saving his life. The first lifesaver, the wetsuit. I was wearing a thick one because I thought we might hit some cold water," Rick said. Looking back, that suit probably saved me from a worse bite. But there was another factor, the shark. He bit through the wetsuit, and part of me then realized neither one was a fish and just went on his way, Rick said. He was probably a little confused himself. Normally, a shark is not going to go after a human being. After spending some time healing, Rick was ready to get back into the water. I still have a healthy respect for the ocean, he said, and I need the exercise. He felt the same way about the ocean as another diving colleague. Videographer Gary Grayson had already seen his share of underwater expeditions. The Brit knew better than anyone that when you broke through the surface of the ocean, it was almost as if you were breaking through the barrier between worlds. In 2014, Gary and one of his pals set out on an expedition with the scuba group called Dive Life. Both men had gone on more dives than they could count, so neither expected this trip to change their views of the ocean forever. A boat brought the adventurers to the coast of the Isles of Sicily, located to the southwest of England. It was a great spot to explore as the island's warmer temperatures attracted a wide array of flora and fauna. Naturally, Gary and his chum weren't going to make the plunge without packing at least some of their video equipment. They would absolutely kick themselves if they came across a once-in-a-lifetime sight and forgot to record it. Strapping on his fins and mask, Gary plopped into the water and surveyed his surroundings. Most of the group headed off together, but the two videographers chose to peel off in different directions. It paid off. Something caught Gary's eye. Down in the cracks between two rocks, a curious seal poked his head up. He clearly looked intrigued by these human visitors, but made no move to swim out from his hiding place. Still, Gary hoped that he could get near enough to see the seal up close. After all, these animals had a reputation for being especially playful with one another, but he wondered how would they react to a completely different species. Before Gary and his friend even had a chance to think up a plan, however, the seal came out of the rocks on its own. He was staring straight at the divers, almost as if he was welcoming them or feeling threatened. Either way, Gary felt willing to risk getting up close and personal. Besides, he'd gotten within biting distance of sharks and other underwater beasts in the past. He figured that if they hadn't attacked him, neither would a seal. Gary swam closer to the animal and tried to make it as clear as possible he meant no harm. Of course, that's easier said than done when you can't speak and are covered in scary diving equipment. Amazingly, Gary's nice guy act worked like a charm. The seal came face to face with him and sniffed the surrounding water. Gary's captivated friends started rolling the camera to capture the rare interaction. However, the amiable greeting took a sudden turn. The seal grabbed Gary's right hand, not too roughly thankfully, and pulled the human down toward him. One instinct told Gary to pull away and get out of there, but he waited to see what would happen. Soon enough, any fears about a serious seal bite vanished. Instead of tearing at his arm, the seal simply moved Gary's hand down toward his abdomen. Did this wild animal really want a belly rub? That's exactly what he was after. The seal twirled and rotated through the water so Gary could pet him at every angle. Even for all his nautical expertise, the diver had never heard of a seal acting like this. As a matter of fact, he appeared to be acting more like a dog than a sea mammal. Gary could only figure that the entire animal kingdom loved getting their bellies scratched. That much was universal. Unfortunately, Gary knew he couldn't stay down there with his new seal pal forever. He and the other videographer rose back up to the surface and excitedly described their encounter to the other divers. There's no doubt that the seal would also treasure the meeting forever. Who knows, maybe he would seek out more human friends in the future. The seal, incredibly, wouldn't be alone in that endeavor. See, at first, National Geographic photographer Paul Nicholson was shaken when he was asked to dive with the wild leopard seals. That's because, well, they're terrifying. The leopard seal, also known as the sea leopard, is absolutely huge. They can grow to 10 feet in length and weigh as much as 1,300 pounds. The only pinnipeds bigger are elephant seals and walruses. Still, he was a seasoned photographer, so years of experience told him you can never be too careful around a wild animal. He recounted his first, oddly friendly encounter with the sea leopards. I slipped into the water, terrified of what might happen, and I swam up to this leopard seal, Paul said. My legs were shaking, I had dry mouth, and then she took my whole head and my camera inside her mouth and did this great display, Paul recalled. But then the most amazing thing happened. She went off and got me a live penguin, Paul said, and she came up and started to feed me a penguin. Paul stared in awe as this massive seal approached him with what was some kind of offering. And right away, she dropped the penguin. She came up to me and she opened her mouth, Paul said, knowing the sea leopard could have snatched his camera if she wanted. Her head is twice as wide as a grizzly bear's, just huge. Paul said she kept letting these live penguins go, and the penguin would shoot past me and she'd look disgusted as she'd go by me. She did this over and over. It was almost as if she was annoyed Paul was allowing the penguins to get away. She started to bring me weak penguins, then dead penguins. Then she showed me how to eat penguins, Paul said. She would offer me partially consumed penguins. Was she trying to be his mother? She started to take the penguins and actually push them into my camera. I think she thought the camera was my mouth, which is every photographer's dream. This went on for 4 days. Paul continued, and then I think she realized that I was this useless predator in the ocean, probably going to starve to death, and I think she became quite panicked. The experience was one he'd never forget. So here I came to Antarctica to photograph this potentially vicious animal, he said. To have this predator, this top predator in Antarctica, take care of me and nurture me and feed me for 4 days straight. It was the most incredible experience I've ever had as a National Geographic photographer, said Paul. The iconic magazine has allowed other incredible photographers like Paul to chase amazing shots. Just look at these incredible photos. Reddick, Mizerna, Poland. This yearly cattle drive follows nearly 1 million animals as they return to their farms after a summer of grazing in the pastures of the Alpine region. Though even with all the commotion surrounding this event, it appears that one driver forgot what day it was. Best friends, Soldotna, Alaska. Bear cubs are known for their high energy and love for play, but it seems these little guys seen in Lake Clark National Park would rather kick back, relax, and munch on a little grass. Hopefully the photographer didn't mistake the cubs for 2 cuddly teddy bears and try to take them home. Jute worker, Dhaka, Bangladesh. At first glance, this man appears to be holding the Guinness World Record for the thickest and fluffiest hairdo. But sorry, big hair fans. This man is simply lugging a bale of jute, a fibrous plant material used for making rope. Baby teeth, Tanzania, Africa. Raising kids sure can be a hassle, especially when they start getting bored of the same old games. Luckily, this mama lion of the Serengeti knew exactly what to do when her cubs needed a new chew toy. Unreal, Mojave Desert, California. It's amazing that this graveyard of Volkswagens and Audis in California actually exists. Following an international scandal concerning the inaccurate emissions reports, thousands of vehicles were recalled and dumped in the middle of the desert. Embarrassed, Brook Falls, Alaska. In the midst of fishing during a salmon run, this overeager bear lunged a little too soon and took a tumble down a tiny slope. Thankfully unharmed, he climbed back on the ledge and continued to fish after his fall. The shepherd from Transylvania, Bran Village, Romania. It turns out that vampires aren't the only thing that come from Transylvania. As you can see, Nia Dan, a Carpathian shepherd in the Bran Village region, has plenty of sheep and wool to go around. Hungry hippos, Tanzania, Africa. While you probably won't find any white marbles here, you can bet these hippos are still in the mood for a feeding frenzy. Luckily, no one has to risk a hand cramping from slamming down on a bunch of little levers. An overcrowded train journey, Dhaka, Bangladesh. There may not have been enough seats on this train heading for Dhaka, where passengers hope to celebrate Eid al-Fitr with their loved ones, but there was plenty of room on the roof. Enduring Spirit, Garrander, Montana. The American bison has long been considered a symbol of strength and perseverance, and this photo of a lone one in winter perfectly encapsulates these sentiments. Despite the 15-degree weather and heavy snowfall, this bison confidently treks on. Inquisitive Eyes, Indonesia. A tribal girl's curiosity is on full display as she stares into the unusual object being pointed at her by the photographer. Is she perhaps imagining the other strange wonders that may lie just beyond the boundaries of her village? Halfway Home, Lindi, Tanzania. This photo of an elephant half-stained by the river water was snapped at the halfway point of her journey back to the rest of the herd. The perfect metaphor, wouldn't you agree? Ajurim, the Eagle Huntress, Churhurdi, Bayan Oelgi, Mongolia. While the tradition of eagle hunting is usually passed down to young men, Agarim, a young huntress from the Altai Mountain, has proven that women can fly eagles just as well as their hunter counterparts. Snowflakes, Beicho, Hokkaido, Japan. This photo was taken at Blue Pond in Japan, but something about this scene is eerily reminiscent of the forest of A Nightmare Before Christmas. The pond, frozen over in the wintertime, was man-made to prevent nearby Mount Tokachi from polluting a river. Night Statics, Colima, Mexico. It's one thing to catch an erupting volcano on film, but perfectly capturing the moment when the cold winter air created a static storm around the lava plume is what makes this photo seem truly divine. Uz and Oz, Anlio, Calabarzon, Philippines. Things look pretty bleak for this little grouper, but shortly after this photo was taken, it managed to wriggle itself free from the lizard fish's mouth. Unfortunately, the young fish's relief was short-lived, as a passing snapper quickly gobbled him up. Flying at the Crossing, Tanzania. No, this isn't a portrait painted by some master artist. It is just a simple photo of a herd of wild beasts crossing the Mara River. The layering of dust, sun, and shade gives the image an almost unnatural look, and you might have to look a bit longer just to convince yourself it's real. Spa time, Africa. The best way to cool down under a summer heat wave? Why, a dust bath, of course. Coating themselves in the dirt is the best way for elephants to stay cool, and this practice also serves to keep mosquitoes at bay. An astonishing chase, Rift Valley, Kenya. This chase actually has a happy ending. Instead of preying upon the gazelle fawn, the cheetah actually started playing with the young deer before setting it free to return to its mother. Even the animals value the life of other animals, the photographer wrote. Mid-shed, unknown. Anyone in the mood for chameleon chips? Unlike their snake relatives, these tiny reptiles shed their skin in bits, as opposed to one long piece. The photographer wanted this picture to capture just how vulnerable a shedding chameleon is.